Bend Around the Wind by Skylia. Chapter 98, The Banquet, Part 2. Loki watched the portal with growing trepidation. Why did it have to be tonight when so much was hanging in the balance? His life, his future, his fate, so much was at stake. He needed everything to be perfect. He knew, of course, that it was too much to ask for, but he expected, minor problems. Stark was thankfully gone now, so there was only Hatchet by his side. He did hope that more help would arrive, in case their unwanted guest was hostile. He was not enough of an optimist to expect anything but an enemy. It's not like he made a habit of befriending powerful beings. Quite the opposite, actually. The tendrils that grew around the portal expanded even further, spreading out to the floor, cracking the marble. Hatchet tilted his head and frowned at the glowing dark shapes when they started to thicken and emerge from the floor like thick roots of a tree. There was not exactly recognition in his gaze, but he seemed to have more of an inkling about whom to expect than Loki. "Do you know who this is?" Loki asked him. His own list was getting shorter and shorter as the seconds passed, but none of the names he could think of meant anything good. Hatchet raised his eyes to the portal again, just as it darkened further. A second layer of fog, thick and gray as a storm cloud, started flowing through it. "I think I do," Hatchet said quietly. Loki felt his body tense and his magic flare up underneath his skin in reaction to his tone. He focused his attention fully on the gateway again. A dark shape stepped through, came forth out of the thick fog. Loki felt a breeze upon his face and the scent of rain, grass, and flowers. He realized a moment before he saw her. She was just as imposing as the last time Loki laid his eyes upon her. Even barefoot, she was taller than Loki, skin black as fresh earth, glistening from the lights above her on the ceiling. Her dark hair was untamed, framing her sharp face wildly, and her eyes, a pair of burning embers, almost like Heimdall's all-seeing gaze. "Baba Queen," he addressed her, keeping his voice even and confident despite his surprise. Nay, shock. It was definitely shock. Her gaze settled on him right away. The last time he saw her, the thick, dark lips were stretched wide into a smile. Now there was a visible tightness on her face. The dark fog was still swirling around her from the gateway, and it made her stand out less in the bright room. It felt like just a speck of the deepest and darkest forests of Alfheim slipped through along with her. "My invitation must have gotten lost," she said in her deep voice. Loki tensed. Oh no, let her not be insulted. He was already prepared to spin some words, but Hatchet stepped forward before he could. He bowed a little, then looked her square in the eyes. He was uncertain in a way Loki rarely saw him to be, and he also appeared to be confused, which was an even rarer sight. "My most gracious Baba Queen," said Hatchet, his tone humble and careful. "I speak for both myself and my dear friend Loki when I say that there is no greater honor." She cut him off with a chatting scoff. "How are you addressing me, boy?" she questioned. Hatchet's eyebrows climbed up on his forehead, and he looked even more confused. Loki just waited, letting his friend speak for now. Hatchet and the dark Fey Queen kept looking at one another for a long and tense moment. Then finally her dark lips widened into a sharp smile, white teeth practically gleaming. It took a moment for Hatchet to react, but then he just huffed, all tension seeping out of his body. "Hello, Baba," he said, smiling back. The Queen spread her arms widely, making all the gold beads on her shift and jingle. She wore nothing but those beads and bands, and they left most of her obsidian skin uncovered, her long legs, wide hips, and ample bosom. Not unusual for an elder Fae. They were none too fond of too many garments in Loki's experience. Only her neck was not bare. From her clavicles up to her chin, she wore wide gold bands. "Come here, child," she called. Loki thought it was best if he remained silent as Hatchet hurried over to her. Baba Queen drew him into an embrace, pulling his head on her shoulder and running her black fingers and sharp nails through his white and blonde hair. Loki did not show his surprise, but watching them made him realize that he never really saw Hatchet much among the Fae he grew up with, and he had especially never seen him with her. "Did you like my gift?" Hatchet asked. Baba Queen laughed, throwing her head back into light, making her many earrings and golden beads tingle again. The sound of her voice was almost vibrating in the room. Her magic was overflowing even from such a simple burst of emotion. When Loki handed over Hatchet's wooden box on Alfheim, she did not react at all. "Oh, I loved it, you clever boy," she answered and kept stroking his hair. "You enjoy playing with me, Baba?" Hatchet said next, a little petulant. The Queen just smiled widely again. "Of course I do," she said. She paused at one of the gold strands in Hatchet's hair and frowned. "What have you done to yourself, foolish child?" she asked. "What I had to," Hatchet answered. Baba Queen hummed in consideration, then magic flared up between her fingers, the same sharp blue-violet color that tainted Loki's portal just before. Loki tensed at seeing it, but he remained firmly in the same spot since Hatchet did not look concerned at all. Baba Queen ran her fingers through Hatchet's hair again. Wherever she touched, the gold locks brightened with light and all color washed away again, leaving it snow white. Hatchet relaxed in her hold, leaning more heavily on her. She only repeated the movement a few times, but Loki knew that Hatchet's dark indigo eye must have been turned violet again. Hatchet stepped back from her when she was done and smiled wide and brightly. Baba Queen touched his face with undeniable fondness. "You have not invited me," Baba Queen said again. Hatchet did not dance this time, and neither did Loki. "We intended to do so when we had more suitable company," Loki answered easily. "Like the Fae of Midgard." Baba Queen looked over to him and started walking closer. Loki stood still and waited. You show your allegiances in the most charming way, trickster," she said and reached out to touch some of the gemstones in Loki's hair. He let her. It would have been rude not to. "Look how alive they are with magic," she continued. "My kin of Midgard seem to be fond of you already." Hatchet stepped up next to her. "It's been so in Alfheim. Why not on Midgard?" he asked. "Loki is delightful company, after all."
"And what of Jotunheim?"
Baba Queen smiled as she traced some of the raised lines running down Loki's face with her eyes.
"Although you should know that our kin that still live in the realm of giants are harder to please than the good folk of Midgard. You may look like a Jotun, but your every word is like an Aesir's."
She said the last word with a slightly angry curl of her lips. Loki thought that her being among elves would be a problem, but he should have known that there was another race she might dislike more. Not ideal at all. "Brother!" Horrible timing! Loki turned a little to see Stark and Thor enter the room, but no one else. He must have run into the Thunderer before reaching the Avengers. Stark was frowning, but he clearly realized that there was, in fact, no fight going on. Thor, on the other hand, was grinning. He was marching toward them confidently in his armor and billowing red cape. His eyes lingered on Loki for a moment too long, which made Loki newly aware of his appearance. He couldn't help but clench his hands in reaction. He knew that Thor had seen him like this before, and his brother's smile did not dim at the sight of him, but it still took Loki a moment to relax again. Baba Queen was looking at Thor cynically. Who did not know the son of Odin in the Nine Realms? Loki was quite sure that whatever she heard about Thor, it was not something that pleased her. The Fae were violent, especially when provoked, but they did not share the values of Asgard. They did not believe in such a thing as an honorable battle. They fought, killed, and destroyed, but never for ideals. Everything was personal for a Fae. Thor's smile, if possible, just turned brighter when he turned to look at Baba Queen. "What a joyous surprise to see you," he declared. "I thank the Lord you have decided to grace us with your presence." Oh, he did not. But yes, indeed, he did. Thor even lifted a fist to his chest and bowed in greeting. Baba Queen's face did not change much, but Loki just knew that she had to be surprised a little. An Aesir bowing in front of a Fae, greeting them with due respect, the crown prince of Asgard, no less. It was unheard of. This was more than just flattery, more than just Thor being charming. Such a thing may have never happened in the Nine Realms before. Loki had the urge to grin at his brother and applaud his decision to speak to her in such a manner. And he was not done yet.
I have heard tales of your beauty,
Thor continued.
but they have not given you justice. I am indeed lucky to finally meet you.
It should have sounded acting, but Thor's ludicrously honest face somehow made it work. You looked at his wide smile, his big blue eyes, and you just knew that he was being sincere. Baba Queen looked intrigued right away, and after a moment of silence, she smiled sharply again.
My, if this isn't the future king of Asgard flattering me.
She mused. Thor laughed easily, the sound like the warm touch of the sun.
I am only here tonight as a brother, my lady,
Thor said and clasped a heavy hand on Loki's shoulder. The way he said it made something warm uncurl in Loki's chest, but he ignored it. He needed to focus.
Well,
Baba Queen drawled as she looked at the two of them.
I can see that this will be an interesting evening.
Okay, catastrophe averted, Stark said when he came back into the room a few minutes later. Loki just finished reestablishing his gateway. With magic on, it went a little slower, but it was finally returned to its original shape. How so? He questioned him. Stark told him not to worry and left with Hatchet, Thor, and Baba Queen. He told him to focus on the portal. The last minutes were more than a little nerve-wracking for Loki. He berated himself 100 times for not insisting on accompanying her himself, despite trusting Stark and Hatchet and, yes, trusting Thor as well, curse them all. Well, Hatchet and Thor kept her from arriving to the hall too quickly, so I texted Pepper and told her to free up the second Avengers table. Hank, Janet, and Bucky hit the bar, while the others are now sitting by the presidential table. So when Miss Big Dangerous Fey Lady arrived, there was already an entire table waiting just for her, with waiters running up and down to bring her everything she wants. So yeah, she seemed pleased enough. Are Thor and Hatchet still with her? Loki asked. Yep, she's holding on to Hatchet like a mama bear. I doubt he's gonna be able to leave her table all night, and she really seems to like Thor. Not that I'm surprised. Blondie brought his A-game. Loki smiled a little. Never underestimate Thor when it comes to warriors or ladies. He knows how to charm and impress. He does not even have to try too hard. Yeah, no kidding, Stark agreed, although the table is getting a little weird. He said, I think grass is growing on the floor where she's sitting, and there's like clouds gathering, I think. Not surprising, Loki shrugged. Okay, so Pepper wanted me to tell you that you promised her Momo surprises, said Stark with a grin. Loki huffed. This was more than beyond my control. So, how bad is it that she's here? Stark asked. Not as bad as I imagined, Loki told him after thinking about it for a moment. How are the elves handling her presence? They're wary, Stark said, his tone sobering immediately. So we better get your uncle here quickly. I think that would settle them again. Loki couldn't agree more. He opened up the gateway again and hoped that the Lady Gerd was not going to be too cross with him about the delay. He knew, fortunately, that his uncle was harder to insult than that, but he knew nothing about her. They stepped through the portal a few moments later. Frey was in white and gold, as always, and by his side a tall and slender lady in white and blue. She looked Aesir, so she must have hidden her true form with magic. Loki would have never suspected her to be Jotun. She had golden skin and hair, bright blue eyes. She would have fitted right into the Aesir court, and nobody would have been the wiser. Then a third person stepped through the portal, which meant another unexpected guest. He was a tall, pale-skinned man with short black hair. He was well-built, but did not have the figure of a warrior. Loki had never seen him in Alfheim, and he certainly did not look Aesir either. He had to be a Jotun as well, another witch. Loki stepped closer to them, Stark by his side. Loki! Frey smiled and held out his hand. Loki clasped his forearm and managed not to show surprise when his uncle drew him into a brief hug. I promised your mother I would do that, Frey said when he let go. Loki's lips curled up into a smile. You have my apologies for making you wait, he said then. We had an unexpected guest. His eyes looked over to the portal where the dark roots were still deeply embedded into the wall and the floor. Frey, Lady Gerd, and the Jotun man all glanced back at it as well.
Oh, here, Frey said. I shouldn't be surprised. You are alive, so I assume it went well.
Thor seems remarkably adept at entertaining him,
Loki answered with a smile. Your mother just keeps astonishing me,
Frey said, obviously pleased.
but let us not be rude. Allow me to introduce Gerd, Lady of Ifingern, daughter of Gmir the Protector, the Lord of Glasiverlir.
Loki bowed deeply, and he saw from the corner of his eye that Stark did the same.
I do not know what shape to take, but you just answered my question.
Lady Gerd said as she held out her hand. Loki took it, and the second he touched her skin, the tan color was replaced by Jotun blue. It was the same rich color as Loki's own skin, although her markings were quite different. When he looked at her face again, her brilliant blue eyes were replaced with red, but her hair remained blonde. Not sun-touched like Thor's, but a pale silvery color, dark at the top and almost white at the tips. She still looked stunning, though. There was no other word for it. The tall man standing behind her took her shifting as his cue to drop his guise as well. He was many inches taller than Loki, but still not as imposing as the Jotnar warriors Loki encountered before.
This is Skrymir,
Gerd introduced him.
He is here on behalf of the Lord of Utgard.
Ah, Loki's infamous namesake did not want to be left out of this discussion, as it seemed. The giant was sizing him up. Loki could tell. He could not, or did not, bother hiding his displeasure either. The Lady Gerd was a lot harder to read.
We welcome you, Loki continued. I'd like you to meet my beloved and our host for the evening, Master Tony Stark of Midgard.
Ah, there you are.
Frey smiled again as he extended a hand.
Both my nephews have practically sung praises of you.
Stark clasped Frey's offered arm and smiled charmingly. Oh, well, Stark said, playing at bashfulness. They were absolutely not exaggerating. He finished with a grin. Frey laughed, and even the Lady Gerd smiled a little.
How curious I have been,
Frey said.
I'm starting to see what they meant.
I aim to please, Stark said. Then he also bowed to Gerd. My lady, thank you for accepting our invitation.
It's not as if I came for a feast, she said. My father sent me here with a very specific task, which I fully intend to complete.
Would you rather take your table now or later? Loki asked them.
I think the other guests can wait, Frey answered. It's best to get the politics out of the way as soon as possible.
Loki nodded in acknowledgement and turned a little to lead the way.
We may have words in private, then join the other guests in the great hall when we are finished, he said.
Frey turned to look at Gerd, tilting his head questioningly. She nodded in return, accepting the proposal. Loki was not yet sure what his uncle saw in her, if there was anything there besides politics and diplomacy, but he was certain that he would find out very soon.
You must understand that this is not something that depends on my goodwill, Gerd said. If you can do what we need from you, then your wishes will be granted in return. If not, there will be nothing to talk about.
It really did not take long for Loki to see what might have appealed to his uncle. Frey's never been a romantic soul or someone easily taken by tender emotions. He wanted a queen, a strong one at that, not just one for decoration. He most certainly seemed to have found her.
Tell me your requests, then, Loki prompted, and I will attempt to oblige. Both my father and the Lord of Utgard wish for nothing more than to make Jotunheim flourish and prosper once again. One thing is essential for that, the casket. Frey implied you may be able to return it to us. I will most certainly be able to do that, considering it's in my possession,
Loki answered. There was no need to dance around it. They were hidden from Heimdall's gaze, and no one else was listening.
Well,
Skrymir asked, speaking for the first time.
I hid it, but I can collect it in a matter of days, if necessary,
Loki answered.
are we to take your word for it?
Skrymir narrowed his eyes.
Liesmith.
You need not trust my word, Loki said. I will deliver the casket to Jotunheim myself at the right time. It would be quite foolish of me to show up among you empty-handed, wouldn't it? That is true enough,
Gerd agreed.
If we expect you to show up with a casket and you never arrive or come without it, you will be left to face the consequences. It would indeed be foolish to lie about this of all things.
I believe the casket is to be handed over to the Lord of Utgard. Loki continued, ending the discussion about his trustworthiness swiftly. It was never wise to let others ponder on it for too long. Yes, the people of Jotunheim lost enough because of a king. They would not want to hand over the very heart of a realm to another. Gerd said, The casket is to sustain our land and connect us to the rest of the realms, not be floundered as a weapon. And once I hand over the casket, what then? What is my assurance that I will get what I want? Loki asked. He trusted his uncle, but not that much. Gerd smiled, expecting the answer, but Skrymir spoke instead of her.
If you hand over the casket to him, the Lord of Utgard will declare you Vaskshofar, a brave prince, the title usually awarded to heroes of war and others who have done a great service to Jotunheim.
Loki looked at them dubiously. I sincerely doubt that the giants would be all too pleased about me receiving such a title, considering what I've done. It might not be common knowledge that I did it personally, but I assume plenty of Jotnar know that I was the one who invited Laufey to Asgard, where he was then slain. Gerd just smiled again. Oh, how little you know of our people, she said. There is an old law on Jotunheim, Frey explained, that states that a son, daughter, or sibling of a king may challenge the ruler if they believe him to be unfit for the throne. I did not formally challenge him, and I did not defeat him in true battle, Loki reminded them. Gerd scoffed. If he lost an honest battle, then he was weak, she declared. And if he was so blinded by rage and bloodlust that it allowed him to be tricked, then he was a fool. Either way, he was no longer fit for the throne of Jotunheim. Not to mention that Laufey was the one who dragged the realm into a war they have lost, Frey added. And he lost the casket of ancient winters to Asgard. The number of Jotnar that thought him to be unworthy of the throne are many.
Then why didn't they kick him off of it? Stark asked.
He had no siblings and all his sons died in the war, Gerd said. Well, except for you, Loki, our lost prince.
And why couldn't your father do it? Stark questioned. I mean, no disrespect or anything, but if you were all unhappy with him, then vive la revolution. Not to brag, but here on Earth, bad kings usually end up pretty dead pretty soon.
Charming, Gerd smiled. But our ancestors protect the king of the land. They cannot be dethroned only by following the laws of old, unless one wants to invoke the wrath of our forefathers.
Stark looked at her for a moment, but wisely made no comment. Just nodded in understanding.
So I will not be guilty of regicide or patricide in Jotunheim,
Loki said. He was a little surprised, to say the least. He expected that at least some of the giants would want to take revenge for their fallen king.
If they intend to accuse you, my father will be more than happy to remind them of our old laws, Gerd said.
And what of the damage that was done by the Bifrost?
Stark asked. How many died? Loki asked quietly. Maybe a couple of hundred, Gerd said. Not many Jotnar live that close to the Bifrost site, so you need not worry about that. What do you mean?
It means that most Jotnar assume it was Asgard's punishment for Laufey's assassination attempt, Frey said. And we're going to let them believe that.
Besides, all who died belonged to Laufey's clan, Gerd said. You are his only living son. It would be your right to seek vengeance, but you obviously won't. So I will not be held responsible for any of my deeds,
Loki summarized, and Gerd's blood-red eyes turned sharp and hard in a second.
Do not think that you could get out of punishment so easily on your own, she said. Despite the title God Loki will bestow upon you, you will not be protected by any old law. And believe me, among the lords who thirst for the throne, there are many who would want to see the line of Laufey eradicated.
And you may be Laufey's only successor, but his clan won't stand behind you, Frey said. You are born a magic user and not a warrior. You have no place among them.
A Jotun without a clan is usually good as dead, Skrymir stated. I understand, Loki said quickly. I would never underestimate the enormousness and importance of your help. You know what words to speak and when to speak them, Gerd said. Let's hope your actions will follow suit.
Loki did not comment on that. There was no point in making promises. He would have to prove himself with deeds.
I have heard what the Lord of Utgard requests of me, he said instead. But what of your father, Lady Gerd?
As soon as you've been named Vaskroffer, you are to forever forfeit your claim to the throne of Jotunheim, she said simply. Also, you are to declare my father as the only one who should have it in your stead. Once you've done that, Utgard Loki will voice his agreement. The throne will be good as his with that.
That sounds more than acceptable, my lady, Loki told her.
I merely have one question. And what would that be?
Will I be able to hold on to that title once your father is king? And let me explain before you misunderstand. I do not wish to have any power over Jotunheim. If your father so wishes, I won't even set foot in the realm again after everything is said and done. But the title itself could grant me advantages in other realms. I would hate to let go of that.
Gerd considered him for a moment, then smiled sweetly.
I'm sure my father could be convinced to accept you into our clan, which is how you keep hold of your honorable title.
Truly? Loki frowned. He assumed that it was a small thing to ask for, but from what he learnt of the Jotnar clans so far, especially Gymir's clan of witches, this was not an insignificant offer.
I am to be your aunt very soon, Gerd said, and I would love nothing more than to see our family thrive in all realms.
Family. The way she spoke that word, she might as well have been speaking about chess pieces. She was an ambitious one, not one to shy away from a little intrigue or a lot of scheming, and she also had the mind and the charms to achieve what she wanted. Dangerous. She was truly perfect for his regal and cunning uncle. If Frey truly claimed the throne of Vanaheim as he intended, while Gymir took the throne of Jotunheim and Thor became the king of Asgard, then they would thrive indeed. 3 realms, 1 family, with the loyal support of Alfheim and hopefully Midgard one day too. Not even Odin could have ever hoped to achieve this with his warmongering. Loki had no doubt that his mother had her hand in this as well. Frey was cunning, true, but he always relied on Frigga's support and calm insight. Loki had never known him to act before he had her approval, which was very wise of him. So now that we have business out of the way, Stark spoke up. I say it is time to party. We have the best of the best delicacies of Earth and plenty of elven wine just waiting for us.
Also, Lady Pepper has arranged some delightful entertainment,
Loki agreed. And I bet the ice elves would just love to finally have some Jotun company again. Stark added with a grin.
I cannot say no to that,
Gerd said, standing up. And I better make sure the elves and Baba Queen do not find one another's presents too cumbersome. Frey said, "And the way I know our Dark Queen, she already summoned some company." Oh, more Fae, of course. Stark realized, that's not going to be chaotic at all.
I do not have chaos vibes,
Loki declared. Stark started laughing immediately, and both Frey and Gerd looked at them with amusement, despite not understanding the jest. Skrymir still looked displeased and suspicious, but he voiced no objections. He followed them out silently. Loki hoped he would not cause trouble and report back to the Lord of Utgard unfavorably.
Do not mind him.
Gerd leaned closer to whisper in his ear. She must have noticed him watching the other Jotun.
Actually, he's been quite excited to meet a Jotun who is a mage instead of a witch. He's hostile when he's uncertain.
Give him some strong wine, feed him good food, and you'll see he's quite a trickster like yourself.
Loki nodded his thanks at her for the advice. Well, if it was wine it took and good food, then they would eat and drink plenty. He may not have been born an Aesir, but he grew up as one, as Thor's brother to boot. He knew how to celebrate. Party time? Stark asked. He looked eager and a little hopeful. He was probably completely fed up with politics already. Oh, yes, Loki agreed. Stark grinned at him. One of the many weights Loki carried in his heart lightened. He knew that not everyone would be pleased about how little he was going to be held responsible for in Jotunheim, but he could not find it in himself to care. He decided and swore to face justice in Jotunheim, and even if the giants did not demand his head, he still kept his word. He put his fate in their hands, and nobody could fault him for wanting the scale to tip a little in his favor. He was the god of mischief after all. It was only expected. So yes, Stark was right. It was most definitely time for a party.